Good evening, everybody. That was an excellent presentation by your group. We are ready to give ours now. The whole premise of ours, we came together again this semester. We formed these groups. I was this odd out auditory learner that got shuffled into these kinesthetics here. So we decided to put tons of movement into our display. My learning isn't as reflected, but lots of movement is going to happen in this. The objective that we're going for here is we're going to piece together a puzzle. Now this puzzle represents everything that we've learned this semester, everything that we've studied in our PBLs, come up with and done research on. The first, and how we have this laid out is as a class, we have pieces. Each person brings something different to this table. And we're all putting it together to create the big picture. So we have our class here. So first we have Brian, Addie, Regina, Ethan, Jill, who unfortunately isn't here, Maddie, and then myself. We have all these pictures here. Fabulous, right? Before we start, Jill did have a message that she wanted to.
Hi, group. I am so sorry that I'm not going to be able to be there today. I know that you guys are going to rock it. I've sent by Dropbox videos kind of like this one that include all of the information I would be speaking on for my certain puzzle pieces. Know that I'm with you tonight. And you guys let me know how it goes. I'll be missing you. Thanks again.
Thanks, Jill. She's here with us here. So she's going to be presenting tonight as well, even though she's not actually here. So she actually has the first piece of our puzzle, which is going to be teacher licensure. Okay? And so she has her own slide and video. We're going to listen to Jill present about
Teacher licensure is what all of us are working very hard to achieve. The NEA recognizes that there should be multiple pathways for entrance into the teaching profession and for attaining full licensure. None should be considered superior or inferior to the other. Further, the NEA believes that alternative pathways must be equal in rigor to traditional programs, and that every teacher candidate must meet identical standards and measures in order to receive a professional teaching license in a given state. Now let's look at how to apply for those licenses. First, you must complete an application. You must also have a certification that's signed by your Tennessee college or university that you completed a preparation program. You must also attach the required Praxis 2 exam scores, and it's a reminder that your Education Preparation Institute has to submit or must submit the application for the candidate. You can't do this yourself. There are 3 types of teacher licensure in the state of Tennessee. These have changed a little bit and will be effective September 1st, 2015. The first is a practitioner license. You must hold a BA or BS. You must demonstrate content knowledge with your Praxis 2 scores. You must have completed an approved preparation program, and you must be recommended by your preparation program institute. These licenses have a 3-year validity period. They are renewable once, and you must submit an application. You must achieve qualified Praxis scores, and it's only available if the advancement criteria has not been met. Now, advancement means that you must submit an application. You either have 3 years experience, or the director recommends you for the advancement, or you have met 30 preparation personal development hours. The second license is a professional license. This is an advancement from the practitioner license. It holds a 6-year validity period. It is renewable. You must submit an application, and you must have accrued 60 personal development hours. The non-public license is the same as the public teacher license. However, Category 4 or 5 non-public schools are not eligible for advancement. This must be processed, through the Office of Teacher Licensing in your state. Now let's look at praxis testing. There are 3 praxis tests that you are required to take. The first one being your core academic skills for educators. These are in the areas of reading, writing, and mathematics. You also have a principles for learning and teaching. These categories include early childhood, K through 6, 5 through 9, and 7 through 12. And then you also have your specific licensure area. This is your content area with grade level specific. And passing scores can be found on the State Tennessee U.S. Education Licensing website. Renewal for your license is based on several things. There are training. You may require personal development hours. The training or conference or workshop personal development hours can be acquired by attending one of these. 1 clock hour equals 1 professional development hour. 1 conference or 1 continuing education credit is equivalent to 5 professional development hours. You can also obtain professional development hours by attending a college or university. 1 semester hour equals 10 professional development hours, while a 3-hour credit course is 30 professional development hours, which would be enough for your advancement from your practitioner to professional license. And also, depending on your evaluation scores, you can also earn professional development hours. These are, if you acquire an overall 3 on your evaluation, that's worth 10 professional development hours. Also, if you earn an overall score of 4, that's 15. And an overall score of 5 is equivalent to 20 professional development points. And these have to be submitted by the Department of Education. A transcript of your coursework or a certification that's signed by your conference official can be submitted for those professional development points. Now, if you have an out-of-state license or you want to transfer out of state, you need to check the state requirements because they vary from state to state. But in Tennessee, as long as you have your praxis requirements met, you have experience verification where you have taught at least 3 years in a school, or the Educator Preparation Program Institute has to sign off on that. Applications for these, as well as your transcripts, any certificates and signatures must be accompanied with that out-of-state transfer.
So the Sharpie puzzle piece is the first one that we're going to add.
Next up, we're going to talk about preparing for your first interview, which is something that all of us are going to have to do. We went into depth earlier this semester, so I thought I would just sum it up with the do's and don'ts of interview preparation.
The do's and don'ts of interview preparation. Do prepare a portfolio. Include your educational philosophy, lesson plans, experiences, and letters of recommendation. Do your homework on the school and learn about any special programs, extracurricular activities, and the school's philosophy. Do not wait until the day of the interview to find your resume or try to prepare yourself. It's too late now. Practice your response to common interview questions. Otherwise, you'll get that look on your face when you don't know how to answer something. Do get plenty of sleep the night before the interview. Wake up early. Do not stay up all night watching Netflix. Do dress professionally, neat and friendly. Do not wear that shirt from the Great Gatsby party. Do bring your resume, a list of references and past employers, and a pad of paper to take notes. Do not come unprepared. Do smile and make eye contact. Express interest in the school and in the position. Do not think about what you're going to order at Taco Bell later. Do feel free to follow up with a brief thank you note within 24 hours of the interview. Do not text it.
Thanks.
Alright, so Jill touched on professional development earlier for new teachers, but even the most experienced teachers have room to improve or things to learn. Professional development is designed to help increase teachers' knowledge and skills related to their subject matter. Research shows that 14 hours of professional development can positively affect student achievement. Teachers with 49 hours have boosted achievement by 21 percentile points. So obviously, professional development is amazingly important. In Tennessee, we require 5 days of professional development of at least 6 hours in those days, so that's 30 hours total. Professional development opportunities include attending seminars, workshops, conferences. For example, if you're part of your professional development association, like I know many of our art people are members of the National Art Association, they have seminars and conferences constantly, and going to those you can actually get professional development credit. There are also school-wide in-service days. I know on voting day, Rutherford County schools were closed for an in-service day because it's a safety hazard to have people in the building while students are in the elementary schools. So that's a whole day set aside by Rutherford County for professional development. Presenting at a professional development event is worth double the hours. I know in the field, I talked to Ms. Anderson about, she got together with other art educators in Rutherford County and she taught a lesson to them about Henry Rousseau, and they made clay birds. It was very cute, but she actually presented at that, so she got double hours for that. Activities that are not considered professional development are parent-teacher conferences, working in classrooms, reporting grades, professional meetings, college courses for credit. Any training that the teacher is paid to attend does not count. And that obviously includes any activity that occurs during regular school hours because we're being paid. And also any professional development training the teacher has attended in the past years. So you can't go to the same conferences every single year, go to the same workshops every year. You have to show a variety in your development. Also, Ms. Trill, she told me like Rutherford County has a great website you can go on, and there are tons of different resources. There are workshops for technology, working with kids with autism or gifted students. So there are an array of opportunities for everyone.
So the next topic that we're going to talk about is the very first day. Just like any other job, any of you had, first jobs or going from one job to another, that first day is always, you're trying to be impressive. You don't want to mess it up. You get nervous. Definitely from my own experience, I can sort of relate it to, I don't think that serving is going to be as demanding as teaching, but I imagine the same anxiety, the same stress, the same want to do excellent and, serve these students the same way I take care of anybody. But first days are just like any other job. You're always going to feel anxious or excited. Even the experienced teachers have this same anxiety before meeting a new class in the first day. You always want to establish your expectations regarding the culture of the classroom, your policies, and your procedures. That's how you become an effective classroom manager, just like Harry Wong. Jaron had that in his beliefs there. But Harry Wong definitely preaches this, and it's very important from day one, because once you fall behind, you can't catch it back if you let it slip. You want to communicate and apply expectations. You want to get to know your students on the first day through academics. You can give a test and get to know where they're at. You can give them a poll, find out what their interests are. You want to get to know them on multiple levels. You want to dress professionally, and you want to act like a professional when you're in your classroom, especially on the first day. You have to show your students who you are.
Had scope and sequence. When I thought about scope and sequence before this class, this is what I thought what scope was, and this was sequence. But as Todd kind of touched on, scope's going to be kind of what you're going to be getting into, the depth of what you're going to be doing in the classroom. I know as far as our content, I believe it's like 6th grade stops at, correct me if I'm wrong, William, 6th grade stops at the fall of the Roman Empire, and then 7th grade history will pick up Roman Empire to discovery of Americas. So that's going to be kind of your scope there. And the sequence is going to be the order that you put it in. I have a quote that's coming up here that I really like. It says, it's kind of talking about PLCs too, but it says, educators must do more than give students the chance to learn. They must align their practices to promote learning. I know in the field, we said it in a couple planning meetings. They're all talking about, where are they at in their subject. Somebody will be ahead of somebody and somebody will be behind. But try to do your best in aligning these so you can be in the same order, same sequence as if somebody has to transfer to different classes. So I know in the 7th grade at Smyrna Middle, they're having some behavior problems, and they were worried that somebody might be behind the others because the teachers are different pacing. But yeah, that's definitely want to align. And obviously now I know that scope and sequence is not just a scope or the board game that quite difficult. But
Okay, so my topic was lesson plans, which going through this, we all know what lessons plans are, and we hold them all dear to our hearts. And we're all of the different fields, so our formats are all kind of different coming in the field, but we all have that standard one that we've been doing. But just pulling in all of our resources together and talking through the teachers at Eagleville, the main function of a lesson plan is just to organize our content, and it's basically like a planner. Like you just organize your thoughts, you put down your materials, what you're going to need, your resources, and just it helps to keep you on task about what content you're teaching your students and keep it all on them. And I found some resources that will help with common core standards. The Library of Congress is a really good one for just pulling in state standards and stuff. And I'm going to sit down now because I got brushed on.
All right, so we have more from Jill on personality types and learning styles.
have different personality types. We each learn differently. And when we're going to work together with other teachers and with our students within the classroom, we have to recognize those different personality types and learning styles to be able to work collaboratively and to be able to give an equitable learning environment. Personality types can be difficult. Have you ever had a difficult person that you didn't understand or that always rubbed you the wrong way? Well, maybe if you understood their personality type, you would understand that we need them. Each personality type is unique and fits together to be able to have a cohesive, collaborative environment, especially when you're talking about departments or PLCs or within a school system. Let's look at a couple of those personality types. In class, we did a compass test. Those were north, south, east, west, and any combination of those. Now, usually we have multi-styles or multi-personalities. We're not usually just one personality type. But let's look at a few. The north personality type on the compass test was goal-centered, task-oriented, assertive. These people can be sometimes overbearing, but they are the ones that see a goal, they make sure that the task gets done, they are leaders, usually within the group. We need those people. The South is kind of the opposite. They are the process-centered. They're sensitive to each other. They're good listeners. They make sure that the needs of every individual in the group is met. And we need these people too, so no one's left out. The East is the natural pleaser. They are analytical. They are quality-centered. They're the ones that have the attention to detail. And the West, they're idea-centered. They're creative, they're innovative, they're usually enthusiastic. When the group kind of gets stuck, they're the ones that always pull the group together. So you can see these all work together and they're all needed to work in a collaborative situation. Now let's look at some learning styles. They're most evident within the classroom. When we talk about differentiated instruction, we need to understand that all of these learning styles need to be met within the learning system. Maybe not necessarily each day, but in the course of the week, all of those kind of learning styles need to be targeted. Now, in class, we took the VARC assessment, and it separated learning styles into 4 major categories: kinesthetic, oral, visual, and read and write. The kinesthetic learners are concrete. They like personal experiences, examples, practice, simulations. They do well with case studies, experiments, building models. Oral learners are those that hear or speak lectures, group discussions. They learn by listening to others and interacting and working through thinking while speaking. Visual learners see patterns and shapes. They like maps, charts, and diagrams. And the students that are in the read or write, obviously, are word-oriented. They are like input and output as far as words. Journals do well for them. Essays, internet and Google research is good because there's no oral element in those. Now, the Gardner Multiple Intelligence Assessment kind of breaks it down a little bit more. And you can always Google that to find out the specific breakdown. But the key thing to remember is that when we're dealing with people, they're always different from us. And it's good to understand the different personalities and learning styles so that we have an equitable learning environment, and that so our collaboration with other teachers and within the school system goes smoothly and each need is met, making sure that the student is the priority.
Alright, so going off of what Jill said, no two students are alike. So it doesn't really make sense that we use a one-style-fits-all type of teaching because it's just not beneficial. We need to provide a variety of learning options for our students who have a variety of different learning needs.
Is that too soon?
It was just a picture.
Give me the cue.
Wait, who's got it? Oh, okay. Gotcha. They're out of order. That's cool. Anyway, these need to be considered in planning. You can. I'm sorry, that just really threw me off.
Where do you want to go? I can take you.
Differentiated instruction. I guess it's just right after that.
There we go.
Anyway, back to differentiated instruction. In the planning of your lesson, you need to consider your key facts, concepts, or skills. And then depending on the variety of learners you have in your classroom, you can adapt the processes, products, or end products according to students' readiness, interests, or learning styles. You can also present the material in your instruction in a variety of ways. For example, you want to use visuals for your visual learners. That's also very beneficial to ELL students who are still trying to grasp words. Also, one really great way to do that, to differentiate your instruction, Ms. Trail showed us a website called News ELA. This allows you to adapt the reading level of an article. So, for example, I can find a great article on art. It's divided by subjects. And I can use that one article and then change the reading level for that article so it's differentiated for each student. Also, in the field, I saw a lot of differentiated instruction. For example, I watched a lesson where Ms. Anderson in art was teaching preschool students shapes. They were cutting out different shapes and then collaging them together to create a picture. But pre-K students, some of them have used scissors before, some of them have never done that before in their life. So what she would do is, instead of giving them, those students who struggled with their fine motor skills, instead of giving them a full piece of paper, she would cut the paper into smaller strips. That way it was easier for them to manipulate it and hold it in their hands. She also incorporated auditory and kinesthetic learning. She used this really great website called Have Fun Teaching. It has awesome, I actually enjoy the songs. I know they're very elementary, but they're really great songs about shapes or math, adding, all that kind of good stuff. But she would use this and it would allow students to kind of dance. Also, part of the song is like tracing a circle in the air, so that definitely helped reinforce the idea in their head. So that was just an example of differentiated instruction. Now we can move to teaching strategy. And there are two main types. The first one is a teacher-centered teaching method. Under this method, most of the focus is on the teacher. It's very lecture-based, and students do work independently. You may have seen this in classrooms where, of course, the teacher is lecturing and all the students are doing are writing notes. But we're really trying to move away from that. We're moving more towards the student-centered teaching method. In this method, the focus is shared between the student and the teacher, and the students have an opportunity to actively engage in the learning process because they're working collaboratively with each other. These strategies include problem-based learning, project-based learning, inquiry, case-based teaching, discovery learning, and just-in-time teaching. Also, These are the 4 ACEs of effective teaching. Research shows that they're the fundamental principles of effective instruction. The first one is outcome. During the outcomes, the teacher provides learning goals or objectives for the students. This way, they know exactly where their focus should be, and they know exactly what is expected of them. It also gives the teacher a framework for her lesson. If she knows the objectives, if she knows what she wants the students to get out of the lesson, she can plan the lesson accordingly and then assess according to those objectives. The next ACE is clarity. Teachers should be very, very clear in their expectations. That way students are able to meet those expectations. It doesn't make sense for you to tell a student what to do but not really tell them how you want them to do that. Lack of clarity is often reflected in student performance. So, like I said, if you give very vague instructions, your students aren't going to be able to figure out where you were trying to go with that. The next ACE is engagement. This is based on the idea that students learn through doing. A good teacher engages the students early in the lesson, and again, this allows them to actively construct their knowledge. The last ACE is enthusiasm. As I can't remember who said it earlier, but if you don't like what you're teaching, your students aren't going to like learning about it. Your passion for your content area will show through in your teaching if you're enthusiastic about it, and that enthusiasm will make your students enthusiastic about learning. And then finally, these are some more teaching strategies lined out by Robert Marzano in his book. First one, identifying similarities and differences. For example, in art, you may have a student look at African tribal masks and compare it to Pablo Picasso's Cubism work. And seeing those similarities and differences help them make those connections in their mind. Summarizing and note-taking, reinforcing and providing recognition, homework and practice, non-linguistic representations, like I said earlier about incorporating visuals, cooperative learning and setting objectives and providing feedback, generating and testing hypothesis, and then cues, questions, and advanced organizers. And all of those are strategies you can use in your classroom to help teach your content.
And we're going back to Jill. She has more on dealing with diversity in the classroom through SPED, ELL, IPA.
Some differences are noticeable and others are not. The state of Tennessee separates students into demographic categories, such as ethnicity, gender, age, economically disadvantaged, abilities, SPED, ELL, RTI squared. So let's look at a couple of those. One thing to note, though, before we get started, is 13% of the students across the nation in the state of Tennessee have been identified with disabilities, but most are not recognizable. Let's look at RTI squared first. It's a response to intervention and instruction program that was implemented a few years ago and is fully functional K through 8. All students at this grade level are screened at the beginning of the school year. Now this is skill-based, not standards-based, and it's used to close the gap academically before students are recommended to SPED. There are 3 tiers, the first tier being within the class. Most students fall into this category. Tier 2 is 30 minutes in the class with the teacher, but separate from the whole class. And Tier 3 is small groups outside the class. This is the step right before recommendation for SPED. Now, students are monitored every 2 weeks, and if students need to be recommended for special education and are not making sufficient progress through Tier 2 or Tier 3, then we have a 16 to 20 week time limit before we can recommend students for that special ed. Now, let's look at special ed. There are many categories, and they range from physical disabilities to academically gifted. They include things like autism, dyslexia, deafness, blindness, emotional disturbance, intellectual delay, orthopedic impairment, speech impairment. Now, there is an initial evaluation that's done either by the teacher recommendation or parent recommendation to determine the extent of the disability and services that need to be rendered. A lot of times students come into the school system already recommended for special education, either by a health professional or a counselor. But at any rate, an initial evaluation is done within the first few weeks of school or at the time of recommendation. Reevaluation is done at the minimum of every 3 years, but typically it's done every year. And there are biannual progress reports. Now, an IEP follows each student that has been identified with special ed. These are individual educational plans, and they are compiled by the teachers, the administrators, the counselors, and the parents, and any health professionals that need to be included, so that certain services, accommodations, modifications within the classroom are identified, and that the student can get an equitable learning environment just like the rest of the students in the school system. And the next group that we're going to look at is ELL. This is the largest group that we have in our school system. In the state of Tennessee alone, there has been a 600% increase in ESL students. These are English as second language students, and that's happened in the last 10 years. Most are identified within the first 10 days by evaluation and a English language acquisition assessment. Students that are English as second language usually do not feel like they are a part of the school system. They usually feel isolated, either because they can't understand the language, or usually their classrooms are separated from the rest of the school, and so they just feel like secondhand students. We need to work very hard to integrate these students and make them feel welcome here. It is the law that they are freely and equally educated regardless of their status. So it's important not to ask about their status or their parents' status. We test with academic language. This is the very last language acquisition that these students acquire. Usually they have great social language skills, and they seem like they understand. But in reality, that academic language is so different than what they're used to that we need to make certain accommodations for them. These students typically stay in an ELL program for 3 years. They either have accommodations within the classroom or they have special classes for them. There are also separate standards for ELL students.
And just to comment a bit on what Jill was saying too, I've been in the ESL class quite a bit this semester at Smyrna Middle, and it does feel a little isolated a bit. Like I know in that our speaker that came talk to us about ELL also told us about a lot of times they're in portables. A lot of times they're kind of removed from school, and that's how it is at Smyrna Middle too. The ESL classrooms, there's 3 of them. They're all 3 in portables as well. So it is important to kind of not, even though they're separated from the school, they're like you said, they're not secondhand students, and not to treat them as such. So I'm talking about assessments. I know it's one of Professor Harris's one of her favorites. And so there's a lot of different, I'm going to go through, there's a lot of different things we can look at with assessments. And we've talked about several here in class. You go ahead and go. Okay, so, and this is, we're talking about summative assessment. You gotta make sure there's two big things with summative assessment. You gotta make sure that it's reliable, which a lot of times we might think of this through standardized testing, right? If you have 7th grade math, for example. If we expect these scores from these students, and then the next year comes and we get the same scores, and the next year we get the same scores, right? But we also have to make sure that this happens within our own classrooms too. We need to make sure when we give a test in our classroom that it's reliable over time, and we don't, say we have one class that comes in, they make, they average an 80, for example, but you've got to make sure that's reliable over your classes and make sure that those scores can be reproduced. And then you also have validity. You want to make sure that you are, pretty simple, make sure you're testing what you're teaching, which surprisingly, sometimes you have times where you might have a test that doesn't, either it's not exactly the same information you might have had in class, or a lot of times teachers might not test exactly how they teach. If I teach with, in Spanish, I'll use pictures and motion a lot of times to help teach vocabulary. But if I test and I don't use any of those pictures and I just give them words and I tell them to define these words, I'm not really testing how testing how I'm teaching. So it's not quite, the validity is not quite there. So you got to make sure on that. And so these are some different types of assessments. Some of these we've already talked about in class. And on this graphic, they call it diagnostic, or we've been calling it pre-assessment. This is a big thing. I dealt with this. I taught a Spanish 1020 class last spring, and I had a couple of students from my 1010 class. And so I kind of knew what their experiences were in my class and what they, kind of what we did. But then I had probably 12, 14 other students who I don't know. We know kind of what we're supposed to cover in 1010, but what did they go over in their class? And so I decided to have a pre-test in that class, and it was amazing to see the difference between some students and other students and that's just one semester. That's 3 months of language in a college class, and the difference between those. So, and I think a lot of times we get stuck on, you might see a pre-test at the beginning of the year like that, but we can't just limit it to that. We also have to look at all of our different lessons and kind of go through and think, well, what are some of the different ways that learners might not know? Like I did, Mr. Bassler was training about learning a second. I did the family, teaching the family members in Spanish, and I did it using an example of the Simpsons family. Well, for part of my pre-assessment, what I did is, what if I had, let's say, ELL students or different things? What if they've never seen the Simpsons before? What if they don't know how they are? So part of my pre-assessment was actually going through and doing little basic things on this is what Homer's like, this is what Marge is like, because they needed to know that in order to get what the activity was about. Then we have our formative assessments, which I'll get into a little bit more later, because these are the ones that are probably utilized the least and are probably some of the most important things that we can do during the learning process. What's going on before we get to that summative assessment and the assessment of learning? We have to know kind of what their progress is during it and how they're doing along the way. And then we have norm reference, really going with different groups, criterion referenced. These would be certain specific things you need to know, and then your benchmarks as well. These are some of our different types of quizzes we can do. Multiple choice, we see multiple choice a lot, and it's good to have some multiple choice, but you don't want to just have that. We like to do it because it's easy to grade. We can run through a Scantron, or Ms. Trail showed us. Now these really fancy things, we can take pictures of things and it grades it for us. And that's good, but we also have to think what's more beneficial for our students. Are all multiple choice tests good? Probably not. You need to have some constructive response, performance tasks, different things with technology, all that sort of thing. Just keep a variety is always good when it comes to that. And then our scoring methods. Of course, right now we have generally paper and pencil, but a lot of times, and like Ms. Trail, I learned a ton of things in that presentation. Just all the different sort of technological advances that we're making, and how that's probably eventually going to be seen in our assessments, and how and with the iPads and all sorts of different things that we can do in the classroom. Is it going to go down to the bottom here? Oh, we didn't. Oh, that's okay. There was a quote right there. We can't really see it, but basically it says that. Oh, that's awesome. I didn't know you could do that. That's cool. Basically, the assessments, they need to show you how the class is running, how your students are doing, and that's the big thing, helping these students achieve. A lot of times I think we think of tests and quizzes. Okay, well, I taught you guys the information. Okay, you guys are going to spit it back to me and you know it, right? It's not just about that. It's about knowing, helping them along the journey, helping them understand the information rather than just giving it to them and hoping that they get it. So you can go ahead and go to the formative assessments. And so I was just saying earlier, these are just a few examples. Professor Harris gave us a great packet of all sorts of different activities that we could do. There's so many. These are just a few. And we talked about exit cards in this class, journals as well, whiteboards, and there's think, pair, share, and there's so many different ways. Those are just obviously a few. There's so many different ways that you can do it. But the main thing is, you know, keep a variety. And you want to make sure where they are in the learning process and make sure you know that before you get to that summative assessment and find out, oh wait, maybe the students weren't maybe getting it beforehand and I'm only seeing that now and we're already through with the material. So that's probably, formative assessments are the hardest for us to kind of keep track of, but they're probably the most important as far as getting that learning process and making sure you know what's going on.
So this is probably one of my favorite things that ever since I came to this university, I've always been about the technology. I bought my iPad right before I came here and got into teaching. Every time I pull it out, Jaren's always heckling me about it, past semesters. But this semester for sure, I've learned so much. 2 weeks ago, I picked up this Prezi. I've never seen it before. It's so much better than PowerPoint, right? I mean, it's just throwing everything away. You know, that's the thing about technology is you start with one thing, and now we've got something that even has a visual display that's more pleasing than what we've had with PowerPoint. So I really, I learned how to use this semester. But students, some of the research that I did shows that students, it's effective in classrooms. Technology is, especially in this day and time where we have so much all around us, so much media, we have handheld devices, tablets, computers everywhere. And studies did show that students use technology, they spent more time involved in collaborative work. They also participated more in project-based instruction. Their writing quality was higher and of greater length. They had more access to information. Everybody has a phone. Most of them have data or Wi-Fi. The world is at our fingertips, or in our hands, in our pockets nowadays, not just on computers anymore. They're in our pockets. Improves your research analysis skills, and you spend more time doing homework digitally.